Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, September 26th, 2023. Time for another live show. We return triumphantly to the air, or not the air, or not that triumphantly, even really. We're back after a day off for the big holiday, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. I'm disoriented as usual following the day. It's a weird day. It always is. And it's sort of tough to come back from, especially when it falls during the week. I guess maybe even more so when it falls on a Monday after, you have your time off for a weekend and then you're supposed to be coming back to work. And that's always a little screwy. But then the fast thing, it's tiring and trying, the whole thing. And it screws you up. Your schedule's off for the next couple of days. Everything's just a little bit weird. And, it's a long day. You fall asleep sometimes here and there. And it's like, what time is it? My eating schedule's off. We break the fast around, regular dinner time, but it just screws with you and it stays with you for a while. So here I am, trying to get things together in the morning, and the schedule's a little bit backwards, but more or less normal. I think everything is okay. We have stories to share with you. I am a little bit out of it in terms of what's up in the news. So I'm looking agog as usual at what Justice is texting behind the scenes about, or messaging via Skype. Everything seems to be working just fine. So let's see. Okay. Oh, yeah. All right. I think I saw the hint about the second one here, saying American women are lining up to say they have higher standards than than Matt Gaetz. Did I see correctly that, what's her name? Is it Cassidy? Is that right? Hutchinson? Is that, she's got her book out, I guess, is what's happening now. So she's making the rounds of television, interviews, etc. And I think I caught out of the corner of my eye via one of the social media things. Do I have this right? That, somewhere a story started, and probably maybe with Matt Gaetz, that she was dating him at some point, and she's denying this as I would if I were her as well. But this first one, let's see, is this also from the book? Let's see, that's his little code, the little songs that we play to hint to one another. I'm awake, I'm alive, I'm gonna do a show. Meadows prepped intel for Trump reporters. That's the tweet. Okay, you'll have to tell me about that one. You want to share a story? Or unless if you've got it covered on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, well then, we can just wait until then. At any rate, we'll see what comes up. And whether we stumble upon it in the natural order of things as the day goes on. Let's see. I've got a couple of things that I parked in pocket during the weekend and before I got busy not eating anything and walking around feeling miserable. There was a lot going on yesterday. Let's see. I see interesting news. Here's interesting news that isn't news at all, I guess. I guess to some people it's still, not everybody picks up on every signal. I don't know. And I don't want to run around telling people, what's the matter with you? You weren't looking, you weren't observant enough to figure this out. But I guess one of the stories that they're excerpting, I guess, from Cassidy Hutchinson's book, The New Republic has this one, but so does everybody, because come on. But now, apparently this is news to some people. The headline says, ex-White House aide, Hutchinson, reveals, in her book, why Trump refused to wear a mask during COVID. Anybody want to take a guess? You'll never guess if you think it's a tricky question. But if you think no, really, seriously, why do you think he didn't wear a mask? The answer is because he didn't want to smear his makeup. Yes. Of course. Honestly, maybe I live in a bubble. I don't know. Maybe I forced everybody around me to think this, or or else they couldn't talk to me. I don't know. But I think everybody I know knew / guessed. I mean, he didn't admit as much. But it seemed pretty obvious that he wouldn't be wearing a mask because the makeup that he wore, the insane amounts of crazy bronzer or whatever stuff that he wore to make it look like he had a healthy skin tone and was tan, even though that was not a healthy skin tone. That was like an irradiated skin tone that you live in Chernobyl. But that's what he did. He's crazy for a number of reasons and, in a number of ways. And that's one of them. He wears this insane amount of pancake makeup to cover up whatever the hell he's covering up. And on those masks, any mask, right up against his face, it would come off. And I don't know, I guess the only supposition, and the real guess here was, well, does he not want anyone to, guess, quote unquote, find out that he wears that much makeup, or is it just an annoyance? I don't know what that part of the motivation is, but I thought it was pretty obvious that he was against masking because he didn't want to be seen in a mask. It was definitely that, I don't want to look like I'm weak. Right away, they interpreted masks as weakness, but I thought it kind of probably started a little bit more with his worry about it coming off on his mask, and then the excuse was, well, I'm so manly, I don't need the mask. And that was something that the rest of his, MAGA followers could pick up on and do. They can't all imitate Trump not wearing a mask because they're concerned about their makeup, because they don't all wear makeup. Although that would have been hilarious if he had somehow led all of American MAGA manhood to start wearing, layers and layers of bronzer that would come off on their, presumably, on their tactical gear, let's say. Or get on their beards. That would be very funny. Anyway, so instead it was, well, I'm so tough, or I lift weights so often I can't get COVID, or I'm too tough for COVID, or even if I get it, I'll tough it out because I don't need lungs, or whatever the hell their excuses were. But okay. Well, Cassidy Hutchinson's new book is out, and I guess they're excerpting it, and this is, I don't know if this is installment number 1, but there you go. Cassidy Hutchinson explains why Donald Trump would never wear masks, even during the height of the pandemic. I don't know how, this is interesting. It's a long thing, so maybe there's more. They must have excerpt more from the book, because it's a book, right? So that'll explain the length of the article, because otherwise, that's it. It was the makeup. And story over, but it looks from the scrolling indicator like there's much more to it. And by the way, may I make this observation, as I did this morning on one of the social media sites, but I repeat myself in this one. Why is it not considered, okay, here's Trump and his makeup. Why is wearing clownish amounts of women's makeup? It's a women's product. And you can set aside all the gender issues you want, but in this case, let's not, because I'm wondering why wearing, like I said, clownish amounts of this makeup, so much so that it interferes with your health, really. But that's not part of it. But why is wearing so much women's makeup not considered at least drag adjacent in this new, Republican MAGA hostility to drag performance atmosphere that we're in? And the fact that MAGA world is so charged up about it. Why is, it's gimmitarianism at heart, but why give your favorite president such an easy pass on, he wears about drag queen amounts of this bronzer. He doesn't wear the rest of the stuff. And, there's technical explanations, and I'm sure drag performers and those who are, I guess, a little more clued in on that part of the world would say, well, he's not attempting to look female. He's not attempting to look like a woman or a cartoonish version even of a woman. That's not what he's up to. It's not the same. And it isn't the same. And I don't want to spend a great deal of time having to argue about acknowledging, well, there's a certain artistry to what they're doing, and that's not what he's doing. But I'm more interested in, isn't it the sort of thing that if you, who are not a drag performer, had some reason, whatever it might be, to make extensive, maybe you're just fooling around, experimenting for a day, whatever it is, or maybe you have a medical condition, or maybe you're just weird and want to look like, a basketball. You smear this much makeup on, you would be justified in saying, well, this is not drag performance. It's not the same thing. But the point here is that MAGA world, if they found out about you, would say, makeup, women's makeup on a male, drag, get him, but not for Trump. That's just pure gimmitarianism, and it's neither here nor there. And I think I can imagine the explanation as to why it's not really drag, but that's starting to come up in a couple of places. I don't know. Maybe we might not make the shift back over to that newest installment from ProPublica, unless there's been a new one over the weekend. There may have been about Clarence Thomas's corruption. I see how things will cascade out today. But Clarence Thomas's latest corruption and his frequenting of the Bohemian Grove gathering. We didn't get to that part, I don't think. Or maybe we made mention of the Bohemian Grove in our reading of that story. Was it Friday, maybe? And what I saw over the weekend was very interesting, that Bohemian Grove struck a chord with some other readers. All right, maybe we'll get to that later. Okay, I'll make notes to myself. I'll probably never get to it. But if I do this exploration, I'll never get back to the makeup thing. All right, note to self. We'll see how it happens here. Back to Donald Trump and his pancake makeup. Donald Trump staunchly refused to wear a mask, as you know, during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. And a big reason why is that he didn't want to smudge his makeup, former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson has revealed. Ordinarily in a situation like this. By the way, who's writing this for the New Republic? It's Tori Otten. And I just thought I should give credit for that. But ordinarily, if this were to come out, I would say, our prolific tweeting has influenced even Cassidy Hutchinson. But one, there's no way she was reading my tweets. And two, I was one of 10 billion people who guessed that. And three, of course, it's true, so I didn't have to influence her to do that anyway. But in another context, I might have thought that. Hutchinson worked, of course, as a top assistant, I should say. And I would guess that Donald Trump probably asked if she would be a topless assistant as well, but I don't know that she ever did that. I doubt it. It sounds like she probably wouldn't have stood for that. Anyway, Hutchinson worked as a top assistant to Donald Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and she eventually became a star witness for the House January 6th committee. She reveals Trump's turning point on masks in her new book, Enough, The Guardian reported Thursday. And just a cautionary mention before we go forward. Cassidy Hutchinson, though she's doing the right thing with respect to revealing the supposed truth about Donald Trump here and is anti-Trump, or, whatever you might classify her now. She's a Republican. She's been a Republican since forever. She'll stay a Republican. She's not necessarily a good person to listen to or follow or take advice from, but she's mad about what Trump did to the country, and that's fine. And that's all we'll ask of her at this point. Trump toured a Honeywell mask-making factory in May of 2020. I remember that, and I remember tweeting about it at the time. And he sparked criticism for not wearing a mask during the tour. I believe I asked the question, what is the PR value to him of touring a mask factory at the height of the fright about the pandemic, the rise of the pandemic? Why tour a mask factory and refuse to wear a mask when everybody else was wearing masks? I mean, you're there to promote the masks. That's why you're touring that factory, and then refuse to wear one, But of course, he was interested in sending mixed signals at the time, and he's extremely dumb. So he toured this mask making factory in May of 2020 and sparked criticism for not wearing a mask. He also, toured hospitals and didn't wear masks. He told reporters he chose not to after the Honeywell chief executive gave him the go-ahead. That is, gave him the go-ahead to not wear a mask in the facility, which, you can do, certainly as president of the United States, but they probably should have canceled the tour. But this was a chance for him to be maskless while all the wimps were wearing masks, even though it's a mask factory that, It shouldn't carry the same message, but for MAGA it did. But Hutchinson writes that Trump initially chose to wear a white mask and then asked staffers what they thought. I slowly shook my head, Hutchinson said. The president pulled the mask off and asked why I thought he should not wear it. So, oh, by the way, so that's something for you, right? Trump, he's so crazy, he wouldn't wear a mask because it smeared his makeup. Hero Cassidy Hutchinson tells us, except actually Cassidy is telling him, you know what? You shouldn't wear the mask. She advised him not to wear the mask because it was smearing his makeup. She's no good. Anyway, I pointed at the straps of the N95 I was holding. When he looked at the straps of his mask, he saw they were covered in bronzer. Trump immediately decided to forego the mask, according to Hutchinson, who wrote, "Why did no one else tell me that?" He snapped, "I'm not wearing this thing." Why did no one else tell you that? Well, you're an insane idiot. And also probably, I would venture to guess, based on nothing, that 10 people could have told you that. But it wasn't until this little hottie over here, it wasn't until, a beautiful, beautiful woman that he takes notice of tells him this, that it would register with him, or maybe no one told him because whatever, you're an effing idiot and you would probably fire people for doing that. By the way, it is interesting that he chose at that point, instead of, he could, I guess maybe tanning beds don't work for him possibly. Is that it? He just doesn't get tan? Maybe. I don't know. But I would have thought, if you gotta have a bronzed face, why not, cook your face in a microwave or whatever it is that they use, a tanning lamp or something like that. So you spend a little extra time doing that so that you can wear the mask and save 1 million lives possibly. And then everybody thinks well of you. At least with respect to how you're handling the COVID pandemic. But instead he says, no, I want the easy way out. I want makeup and no mask. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to catch COVID in a few months and nearly die, but they'll inject me with everything in the world and yada, yada. You know that story too. All right. Well, okay, I'm not wearing this thing. Trump has regularly been mocked for his distinct orange complexion. People often speculate whether he uses makeup or fake tan to get his skin to that particular shade. They do not. Everyone knows that it is makeup, and everyone knows that it would be impossible to get those well-defined lines on the sides of his face with a tanning lamp that has to be applied. So I don't think anybody speculates that, or if they did, they weren't paying attention. And they changed their minds very quickly thereafter. Trump's refusal to wear a mask backfired spectacularly, and he tested positive for COVID on September 26, 2020. P.S. Millions of other people died. You could throw that in there, maybe. You could acknowledge that. He and Meadows hid his diagnosis for several days and didn't announce it publicly until October 2nd. And by the way, imagine if that had been Biden and they had hidden it from the public. And they may well have. That just might be how the White House handles such things. But they would be screaming, impeach him for that, for hiding the truth about his health. Just, more gimmitarianism. Those 6 days were just enough time for Trump to infect Chris Christie. I'm sure he was happy about that. Christie said in December of 2021 that it was undeniable Trump had given him COVID. He also, medically speaking, it's probably deniable, but okay. He also blasted Meadows for not warning anyone that Trump was sick. I would have worn a mask if I knew that, Christie told PBS. Meadows didn't tell us, but I gotta tell you, Chris, you were supposed to be wearing a mask regardless. You didn't because you wanted to be in Trump's good graces, and that's on you. Don't mind telling anybody that. I went into the hospital in the intensive care unit. He didn't call and tell me, so I think that's inexcusable. But I think it's inexcusable that you didn't wear a mask on your own initiative. Okay, guess what? The very long scrolling bar was lying. This is not all one article. It's TNR. I should have remembered that I'd be scrolling through 15 articles. It's just, okay, so that's it. That is it. He didn't wear a mask because makeup. But there were some interesting additional items in there, like to remind us that Cassidy Hutchinson's not a particularly good person in the end. Some of this is actually her fault. even though somebody else could have told him that's true. Someone else should have maybe told him beforehand, or maybe they did and he didn't bother taking notice of it because he was, he's a weirdo and a kind of a pervert at heart. And believe it or not, his perversity drove millions to their deaths on more levels than one. Okay, so there you go. Now you have the information, plus you have the Chris Christie story on top of it. Everybody blaming Trump for getting them sick, but you willingly followed his stupid lead in all of this, and that's really your own fault, and I thought we should point that out this morning. Why not, right? Okay, so the tangents that was going to take me on. Oh, yes, right. Okay, Bohemian Grove. I did write that note to myself. Why was I thinking of Bohemian Grove? I was thinking of it because, the crazy amounts of makeup that Donald Trump wears. Why were we thinking of that? We'll have to go dive into the ProPublica story. How much of it did we get read on the air before we had to duck out for the weekend? And let's see. As I recall, we had, we'll do our best to recap the story. Remember, I'm reading from ProPublica's, what I think is their latest. Clarence Thomas secretly participated in Koch network donor events. They were held at this Bohemian Grove gathering. You'll recall we were all surprised-ish to see Ken Burns in the photo with, which of the Koch brothers is this one? David Koch, plus Clarence Thomas, hanging out on the deck. And, there's a young staffer in the background with a little tag around his neck. I'm not sure whose staffer he is, standing there, getting captured in the photograph. Thomas has attended at least 2 Koch network summits, putting him in the extraordinary position of having helped a political network that has brought multiple cases before the Supreme Court. That was all the backgrounder. Let's see, the scene was set here in January of 2018 when dozens of private jets descended on Palm Springs International Airport for at least one of these, the winter summit being held there. But I guess later they get around to a gathering at the Bohemian Grove, and here's the first mention of it in the article. Thomas's involvement in these events is part of a years-long personal relationship with the Koch brothers that has remained almost entirely out of public view. It developed over years of trips to the Bohemian Grove, a secretive all-men's retreat in Northern California. Thomas has been a regular at the Grove for 2 decades, where he stayed in a small camp with real estate billionaire Harlan Crow and the Kochs, according to records and people who spent time with him there. And that's the important part in terms of the connective tissue today. Now, there's lots of great information still in the ProPublica article, but I did have some idea that you might have read it already or might read it over the weekend. I don't know. We may fill some more time with it. Did I park this in pocket over the weekend or not is the next question, in which we ask, why is the Bohemian Grove thing so important? And we're going to have to take a peek and look and see. No, not there. But my recollection is, and maybe I can find it on the social media sites, but of course there's 15 of them now, and I'll have to just try and remember which one it was. But let's see. If I remember correctly, was it Seth Kotler? Kotler, yes. Yeah, here it is. Okay, I got it. Excellent. Good memory, Dave. Seth Kotler, who on Blue Sky grabbed this bit and says, hey, this detail from the new Clarence Thomas / Koch network reporting stood out to me. Right-wing conspiracists have been obsessed with Bohemian Grove for decades as the place where, quote, the elites, unquote, plot the demise of, quote, real Americans. But what if it was Harlan, Koch, and Thomas all along? That's an interesting point. It didn't register with me. I had heard the name Bohemian Grove, but definitely didn't ring a bell in terms of right-wing conspiracy theorists and their fears about Bohemian Grove. And so, let's see, I think he puts together a little thread on it here, and he takes a screen grab of the paragraph we just read. that Clarence Thomas has been at the Bohemian Grove retreat for decades. Then references to the article and sends people there, praising the work that ProPublica has done on this, and then offers a gift link at that point to a 2011 Washington Post article that talks about the clandestine 2000 video that Alex Jones took of Bohemian Grove that has fed a lot of the right-wing conspiracies. That is really incredible and a great pull, really, to remember that. And yeah, so the article from 2011, June 15th, 2011, by Elizabeth Flock in the Washington Post. I don't know Elizabeth's name and where she's gone, if anywhere, since then. Maybe she's still hanging around the Washington Post. And I've called her name 100 times. I just can't remember. But here it is, Bohemian Grove, where the rich and powerful go to misbehave. That is intriguing, isn't it? Can we spend a little Tuesday time on that? Yes, but not very much before the next break comes up. This article from 2011, illustrated with a old photo taken at Bohemian Grove, this gathering. I guess it's like the Burning Man festival, as it turns out, for rich Republicans, even though Alex Jones was almost certainly concerned that elite Democrats were the ones who were gathering. It turns out not to be the case. Let me get our break music going. The photo illustrating the piece is captioned, "Two future U.S. presidents, Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon, are pictured with Harvey Hancock standing in this photo and others at the Bohemian Grove in the summer of 1967. It goes that far back. Clarence Thomas, of course, not there yet. Hadn't even been to law school yet. Might not even have graduated high school. I don't know. But there you have it. Nixon and Reagan, the elites, the Democrats, plotting the demise of real Americans. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's jump right back to where we were. Oh, yes, right, the old article about Bohemian Grove and the right-wing conspiracy theories about it, even though it has always been or at least the right wing has certainly used the gathering as a platform for itself. Whether they were the only ones present, I have no idea. But maybe Elizabeth Flock had some idea in 2011 when reporting on this for the Washington Post. Every July, she wrote then, some of the richest and most powerful men in the world gather at a 2,700-acre campground in Monte Rio, California for 2 weeks of heavy drinking. Well, at the time, certainly that was a big part of it, and was still socially acceptable. I think it's still happening now anyway, even if it's not socially acceptable, or even if it is, I don't know. It goes in and out of fashion. Heavy drinking, super secret talks, and here's where it gets weird. Druid worship, although parenthetically it then adds, the group insists they are simply, quote, revering the redwoods, which are, scattered around the site, and other rituals. But yeah, you could be forgiven. You could have been forgiven yesterday anyway, but you could be forgiven the rest of the time of the year too for thinking, that loaded word is chosen advisedly. There's a little bit in the story that sort of hints at what they're doing and kind of glosses over it because I could see how participating in some of this stuff. I mean, this is basically like Water Buffalo Lodge, level stuff that they do. They go through rituals. They're weird. If they're taken at face value, you would think these are very bizarre people. But I could see participating in some of these things as like, I don't know, this is just what they do with this stupid thing, and we all do it, and it's a group communal experience. And no, we don't worship water buffalo. We just wear hats. Maybe. But it's, again, gimmitarianism, the sort of thing that they would absolutely point to if they saw it happening on the left and say, this is blood magic, spirit cooking, and you're definitely holding children prisoner in the non-existent basement of a pizza place and extracting chemicals from their blood in an attempt to live forever, and something, yada, yada. They would absolutely 100% do that because they are doing it now. So we know you don't have to speculate about these things. And yet they were doing these things all along. And once again, every Republican accusation is a confession. So back to the story that proves the rule. Their purpose at this crazy gathering was, quote, to escape the, quote, frontier culture or uncivilized interests of common men, which is weird because now, I don't know what that meant in 1967, but now they would be saying, I'm trying to get back to the frontier culture and be a manly man, which is a weird thing. So like the drinking and the acceptability of it, ebbs and flows in its social acceptance, so does, I guess, the meaning and import of frontier culture, whatever that may be. At any rate, the people that gather at Bohemian Grove, who have included prominent business leaders, former U.S. presidents, musicians, and oil barons, are told that, ready for this nonsensical thing, are told that weaving spiders come not here, meaning business deals are left outside. So don't come weaving your web here. Leave all of that aside and just, I don't know what. But of course they're plotting with one another. Maybe not for business deals per se, but everything else. Otherwise, why come and talk to each other at all? Anyway, one exception to this leaving the business outside was 1942, way back when a planning session maybe for the Manhattan Project took place at the Grove, leading, of course, to the creation of the atom bomb, and worse, leading to box office competition with Barbie many, many years later when Oppenheimer came out. And I really don't know why we still think of those two movies together just because they came out in the same day, but we do. And it's funny. So we do it. A spokesperson for Bohemian Grove, I guess that's the place where they're gathering, rather than the gathering itself. I don't know. Maybe it's a gathering. I'm still not clear entirely whether, is that the name of the place where they all gather, or do they gather at some other named campsite every year for the Bohemian Grove thing? Like Burning Man isn't the name of the patch of desert where they gather, but you see what I mean? I'm not certain which one's which. But a spokesperson for Bohemian Grove, and I guess Burning Man probably has a spokesperson too, say the people that gather there, quote, share a passion for the outdoors, music, and theater. And of course, now, these days, fashion among the right wing being what it is, a passion for the outdoors means a passion for mining it or drilling it or extracting minerals from it and selling that stuff, and F the outdoors and F other people who like the outdoors. Losers and Democrats like the outdoors. We're just here to ruin it. But we like porches, to sit on and smoke cigars. Music and theater, of course, I'm sure equally disdained unless it's, Lee Greenwood song, one Lee Greenwood song. And Theater, of course, that is for the LGBTQ crowd. We don't go in on that stuff, but they do. And you'll see, finally we'll get around to the connection in about 20 minutes. The club is so hush-hush that little can be definitively said about it. But much of what we know today is from those who have infiltrated the camp, including, this is some description of him, in 2011, I guess this is all you could say about him, Texas-based filmmaker Alex Jones. I think he would be described differently today. Right-wing radio host and conspiracy theorist. I mean, I guess he still makes films. Is he still Texas-based? I don't know. Doesn't matter. But there you have it. In 2000, Jones and his cameraman entered the camp with a hidden camera and were able to film a Bohemian Grove ceremony. And here's where it gets a little bit weird. At first I was like, well, what are you doing infiltrating this thing? Who cares? You have a stupid conspiracy theory about what goes on here. But this is 2000. This is pre-James O'Keefe. And James O'Keefe probably learned his technique from this. And so he films one of their ceremonies. And here again, if it was a left-wing ceremony, there would be an uproar. But it's a right-wing-ish gathering. It's just, I don't know, either Jones held himself apart from that part of the right wing or whatever, I don't know. Or maybe he was just, in Gimmitarian fashion, shocked to see this thing. So what's the ceremony? It's a little concerning when you read about it in the abstract. The ceremony apparently is called Cremation of the Care. I mean, it's spelled care, C-A-R-E, and it's capitalized here. Cremation of the Care. What does that mean? I don't know. There's a link. What does it say in the link? Where is it taking me? Dark Secrets inside the Bohemian Grove. Oh, the Internet Archive. So I guess an Internet Archive of Alex Jones's page back then. And remember, he's introducing this thing as something from the global elite, which is now, of course, the leadership he's signed on with. But that's the global elite since 1873, it says. The global elite has held secret meetings in the ancient redwood forests of Northern California. Known members of the so-called Bohemian Club include, and he says here, former presidents Nixon, Eisenhower, Reagan, and Bush. The Bush family maintains a strong involvement. But here, I imagine, he's holding himself out as though he's conservative. He's not establishment Republican. And they're somehow different from the weird republicanism that he adheres to. Anyway, the cremation of the care was happening. Now, during the ceremony, it says, members wear costumes and cremate a coffin effigy called Care. Okay, weird enough for you. I don't know why it's called Care. Be interested in finding out somewhat, but maybe later. And they're burning a thing. Okay, it's a little weird. They're in the woods. It gets weirder. They cremate this coffin effigy called Care before a 40-foot owl in deference to the surrounding redwood trees. And I guess, I don't know, does that stretch back to the 1870s? People had weird ideas. They were weirdo Freemasons, whatever. They were normie Freemasons. I don't know. But, okay, it's certainly something you could look askance at if you are not into weirdo rituals, or are gimmitarian to some extent because you just participated in what would otherwise look like a weirdo ritual yesterday, let's say, by refusing to eat all day for some reason, etc. Everybody's got weirdo ceremonies, certainly. Bohemian Grove's spokesperson calls the ceremony a traditional musical drama celebrating nature in summertime. There were some strange ideas in circulation in the 1800s. And if you just do them over and over again because it's tradition, it's now out of context, it certainly would seem weird. The spokesperson also said that while Jones's comments are inaccurate, the footage is real. So you can, in this thing, watch the controversial footage of the ceremony below. That's where it looks like the same footage that we went to with the Internet Archive in the previous link. Another infiltrator, Spy Magazine. Remember that? Spy Magazine writer Philip Weiss posed as a guest for 7 days in 1989, when the waiting list was 33 years long and the Grove had several thousand members. Weiss published the article Inside Bohemian Grove, writing, "You know you are inside the Bohemian Grove when you come down a trail in the woods and hear piano music from amid a group of tents, and then round a bend to see a man with a beer in one hand urinating into the bushes." Honestly, I'm not certain that would tell me I was inside Bohemian Grove. It would tell me I had wandered into hunting grounds somehow, or Texas. Anyway, this is the most gloried in ritual of the encampment, the freedom of powerful men to pee wherever they like, a right the club has invoked when trying to fight government anti-sex discrimination efforts, and one curtailed only when it comes to a few popular redwoods just outside the dining circle. I'm not even certain what I'm reading anymore, but I guess at some point people sued. Women sued to be admitted to the place, and the excuse was, can't do it, men are peeing here. But that's your business. If you want to continue to expose yourself, then go ahead, except, people will rightly say, that's indecent exposure. Well, we want to protect ourselves from that. Well, tough. Go inside or get in the bush and pee there. Anyway, former President Bill Clinton once told a heckler, the Bohemian Club. Did you say Bohemian Club? That's where all those rich Republicans go up and stand naked against redwood trees, right? I've never been to the Bohemian Club, but you ought to go. It'd be good for you. You'd get some fresh air. I don't know exactly what the situation was, but there's a linked article back to something from 2007. And I guess maybe people were accusing him of being a member and going, and maybe he was and maybe he wasn't. But, okay. The Sonoma County Free Press, which has published investigative stories on the Grove since at least the 1980s, says activities include plays and comedy shows. A reminder, it's all men, right? Ready for this one? Here's the connective tissue back to where we were talking about why don't we think of Donald Trump's makeup differently in this anti-drag society, not society, but atmosphere that the MAGA people are creating. Thankfully, it's not the actual society we live in. But, so this investigation says activities include plays and comedy shows in which women are portrayed by male actors. Uh-oh, I know what that means. Full dress and probably makeup to go along with it. But now we're getting a lot closer to, why isn't that just drag? And even in 2011, I don't know, they're avoiding the term. I don't know if there's anything conscious about it, but there you have it. Comedy shows, plays and comedy shows in which women are portrayed by male actors. Womp womp. And there's also more activities. Do you care about the rest of the activities? We finally got to where the rich and powerful Republicans who gather together to plot the demise of real Americans also hang out in drag. Oh, well. Which means, of course, that there are probably existing photos and videos of rich and powerful Republicans who are now jumping on the bandwagon, the anti-drag bandwagon, who are themselves photographed in drag in the past. But we've already been there because we've already seen that, because most high school yearbooks in America probably also show the rich and powerful when they were teenagers dressing up for Halloween as cheerleaders. For some reason, a super favorite among the kind of people who grow up to beat up on others, for whatever reason, think it's hilarious to be cheerleaders when they're teenagers, but think it's, vampirism and sexual grooming when other people do it later in life. So, all right. Once again, what other activities are there? Are you interested in finding out more about Bohemian Grove? There's a little bit more. There are also lakeside talks, which don't sound that ritualistic, in which high-ranking officials speak about information not available to the public. It's bad, it's just not ritualistic. The group calls them public interest talks, except, the information isn't public, and they're not supposed to be discussing it. Protests take place at the Bohemian Grove nearly every year. This year's protest, that was in 2011, was organized by the California State Greens and endorsed by other social activist groups. Bohemian Grove's 2011 retreat begins in mid-July. We don't suggest any infiltrators try to make their way through the entrance, guarded by camp valets and redwoods some 200 feet in height. The redwoods won't hurt you. They're not ants, but they're difficult to get around. It didn't end too well for the last Vanity Fair editor who tried it. And there's a link here to a story from Gawker about, I guess, that episode. I don't know why it didn't end well for them. And that's actually the end of the article. So good. We made it to the end. Now I'm interested in the Vanity Fair article, but don't even try it because it just goes to a link that's dead. But you take our word for it that they said in 2011 that it didn't end well for a Vanity Fair editor who tried it. It also didn't end well ultimately for Alex Jones, not because of this infiltration, but because he's a crazy a-hole and he got himself in a huge amount of trouble and was sued and held liable for $1 billion. And by the way, he's not paying. Maybe the most predictable thing ever about what's his name, Alex Jones. And I think I socked away an article about it not too long ago. And I don't remember whether we ever got a chance to share it, but I'm scrolling to see if I can find it. But if not, and if I didn't put it away, I'll just, tell you it's exactly what you think. He is not paying, and at the same time, I guess it's been documented he's spending some inordinate amount of money on himself and his own travel and upkeep and spending, thousands of dollars in restaurants around the country and not paying the people to whom he has been held liable. And I guess note to self to try to find that article again and share it again, even if I did sneak it in at the end of one of the shows, as I now suspect might have been the case. Okay. Other fun items up for discussion today, and there were other threads that I meant to follow and didn't. We could read the rest of the ProPublica story, and we may resort to that at some point. But another news item that I wanted to share with you, and then one more. Okay, another note to myself mentally. I'll see if I get around to it. But on the better side here, Hunter Biden. Can you believe it? He's back in the news, suing former Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani, who can barely afford to defend himself, over the infamous laptop. They should have said quote-unquote laptop, because there's no actual laptop involved in any of this. It's just copies of what are purported to have been the hard drive of what was purported to have been Hunter Biden's laptop, handed over under suspicious circumstances, to say the least. And you should keep in mind always in the background of all of this, in terms of the provenance of this laptop that isn't a laptop. We already discussed the suspicious circumstances under which he supposedly drops off, or someone drops off this laptop for repair and then never comes back to get it. But it just happens to have been dropped off at a repair shop of a guy who has connections to like the inner circle of the Donald Trump MAGA world or whatever. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And also maybe the guy, I don't know, didn't actually know what was on it, or but did, but didn't, et cetera, et cetera. This all takes place in the context of James O'Keefe and his organization paying someone to steal the Biden granddaughter's, I can't remember which, personal diary, which she left aside somewhere, all sorts of crazy idiocy happening on the right wing to try to get a hold of incriminating feeling things from the Biden family. Even if they can't get it on Joe Biden, they'll get somebody who has the last name Biden or once did, has got to be held up as an example here of the widespread corruption throughout the entire family, and will pay you to steal items that might make them look bad. So keeping that in mind, Hunter Biden is now suing Giuliani. That seems like good news. I have a report here on it from CNBC, CNBC, not the other NBC offshoot thing. Hunter Biden on Tuesday sued former Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani, his companies, and another attorney over alleged violations of computer fraud and data access related to a laptop computer Biden is said to have left at a Delaware repair shop. Defendants are among those who have been primarily responsible for what has been described as the total annihilation of plaintiff's digital privacy. Biden's suit in Los Angeles federal court says they also are among those who have been primarily responsible for the total annihilation of plaintiff's data. Okay. Biden, the son, obviously, of President Joe Biden, since 2020 has been the target of attacks by Giuliani, former President Donald Trump, Republican members of Congress, and conservative media outlets over the alleged contents of that computer. Giuliani delivered information allegedly gleaned from Biden's laptop to the New York Post, a newspaper owned by Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, in October of 2020, a month before the election between Trump and Joe Biden. The Post then published a story based on that data. Don't affect the outcome of an election. New York Post has different standards than the New York Times, of course. And they published the story based on that data, which suggested that President Biden may have attended a meeting with a representative of a Ukrainian company that employed Hunter. Claims that Joe Biden was involved in his son's allegedly corrupt business dealings, which are in part based on information from the laptop, which isn't a laptop, are the focus of an impeachment inquiry, believe it or not, into the Democratic president by GOP-run House committees. Hunter Biden's lawsuit in a Los Angeles federal court also names as a defendant Robert Costello, an attorney and former federal prosecutor who previously represented Giuliani, and you may remember from our discussion of an article last week, who is now himself suing Giuliani because Giuliani never paid him for representation of him, either in this case or in any of the others. So not only is it costing Costello money because he's not being paid by Giuliani, but he is now also a defendant in a lawsuit that's costing him even more money. The suit says, for the past many months and even years, defendants have dedicated an extraordinary amount of time and energy toward looking for, hacking into, tampering with, manipulating, copying, disseminating, and generally obsessing over data that they were given that was taken or stolen from plaintiffs' devices or storage platforms, including what defendants claim to have obtained from plaintiffs' alleged, quote, laptop, unquote, computer. So acknowledging the weird state of being here that we're talking about. We don't know where the damn thing is from. The suit also says Biden's data was manipulated, altered, and damaged before it was copied and sent to Giuliani and Costello. And it accuses them of being involved in, quote, further alterations and damage to the data, unquote, that currently is unknown to Biden. In a footnote, the suit says this is not an admission by plaintiff that Delaware computer repair shop owner John Paul McIsaac, I guess it's not, they separated the Mac and the Isaac. Is that his last name, McIsaac, but he uses the space? Or does he have two middle names, or three? Two. John Paul, maybe just one. John Paul could be his first name. Mac Isaac. But anyway, that doesn't really matter. It's not an admission by plaintiff that the computer shop owner or others, in fact, possessed any particular laptop containing electronically stored data belonging to Biden. We don't know what the hell they had. It's just a lawsuit about what Giuliani and Costello and others were saying about Biden, based on the idea that there may or may not have been such a laptop. Hunter Biden, of course, was indicted in Delaware federal court this month on several criminal charges related to his purchase and possession of a handgun while being a user of illegal drugs. He previously was charged with 2 counts of failure to pay federal income taxes in 2017 and 18. Last week, Biden sued the IRS for what he alleges is the unlawful disclosure of Mr. Biden's confidential tax return information by IRS agents who revealed that information to the media to embarrass him. Giuliani and Costello did not immediately respond to requests for comment. That's where we stand with that one. And I guess that leads us in indictment world to at least mention, I don't think I even put any articles aside on it because this was sort of all right, there is one. Rapidly developing situation, I guess, even though not rapidly enough and for some people, of Bob Menendez and what he's up to. And didn't I just tell everybody the other day I was asked about law school when Gil asked about or let us know that he was going to law school, and it became a topic of conversation. Others who are on their way back into law school or are currently in law school, I can't remember what stage of the game plan we're in here, we're asking, why would I not advise people at this stage of the game to go to law school? And I gave them special dispensation to go ahead and do their personal missions. At least they know what they wanted to do. But people who sort of think law school is an answer to I don't know what I'm doing in life, I would say maybe not. But at any rate, And then that led me to tell the background story of when I went to law school, why I went to law school, what happened to me while I went to law school, and how mad Bob Menendez and his staff were that I was going to law school and leaving, quote unquote, leaving early, right? Leaving at 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the evenings, by which time most people who are lucky enough these days to work 9 to 5 are home and having dinner. I was, quote unquote, leaving early. Anyway, that story being what it was, I did pick up some comments. Gil, by the way, jumped in and mentioned in an email, having heard the secret origin stories of me and the Kagro X persona and everything that goes with it. It made it that much easier to absorb the new information about Bob Menendez, or add it to the pile of things that they disliked about Bob Menendez already. Anyway, so you know what's going on. The New York Times article that I grabbed is from last week, but apparently right at the end, I grabbed this one because things just got worse and worse. You know the basics probably of the story. He's indicted again on pretty much the same sort of story, if not the exact same fact pattern. It's this time a different quote-unquote personal friend, and I don't really know how close they actually were. I don't know these guys. I didn't know the guys in the first indictment either. But pretty much just like the Clarence Thomas story, so-called personal friends giving him rather an interesting collection of gifts, apparently, over the years. And he says it's okay because he's a personal friend. And, you know, there was always that question of what kind of relationship they had. Is there a line that can be blurred, or is it just garbage? And I don't really know. Of course, while I was in Bob Menendez's office, it's not like they don't come to work and say, "Hey, everybody, do you know that I'm taking bribes?" Even if they are taking bribes, they don't tell the staff that. You just get handed assignments to work on certain priorities on behalf of the congressman because he says he's interested in those things. Why he's interested in those things may in fact be because he was interested in them because he was bribed to become interested in them. But he didn't tell us that. Somebody gave me $1 million to be interested in this subject. Go research it. It's just the latter half. I'm interested in this subject. Go do it. But, I mean, it was certainly the case, but I don't think it was different from any other congressional office. It was certainly the case that there were priorities that came through that we were told, well, the congressman has a friend at home or some political ally who says this is important. And it is, because you need to satisfy your donors at some level. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, we got to talk a little bit about what's up with Menendez. And I didn't grab any newer pieces. I don't know that there's any more developments on what he was allegedly up to. Most of the reporting that I've seen over the weekend and into today was about who is and isn't calling for him to resign. The situation sets up such that, for instance, if he were to be convicted and to head into a re-election campaign at some point, even before our trial started, if it's hanging over his head, I don't know when he's up for election again. Is it now? That will make a difference, of course. And people said, hey, you could lose us a Senate seat at this critical moment. Why don't you resign instead and let the Democratic governor of New Jersey appoint a replacement, and then we would stand a chance. That's a good plan. Not if you're Menendez, of course. He doesn't like that plan at all, and says he won't resign. But mounting calls for his resignation from other Democratic senators, and thinking back to how things went down for how is it that I'm now Al Franken? I'm now blanking. Al Franken. Given how things went down for him, you would think that they should go the same, but now, of course, we've also been treated in the interim to the Republican Act. When Republicans are accused of this stuff, they never resign, and activist Democrats are always saying, no, stand and fight, and then, something like this lands on Menendez's lap, and the activist Democrats are saying, no, resign. So, there's mixed signals. I don't really care what he does because I don't know. I think it'll work itself out. I don't think it's gonna. But I the election or the ability to use it against any Democrat in an election is a real thing, though. So I guess I'm more inclined to say, yeah, sure. I mean, it wasn't that valuable to me. It doesn't do me any good to have him in the Senate. So personally speaking, what do I care? Yeah, I guess I go along and say maybe the best thing to do is to take the cautious approach and have him out of there and somebody else in there. But, of course, the Republicans will just accuse the next Democrat to take the office of being equally corrupt because reasons and try and launch an investigation into them, whether there's anything there or not. But, okay, yeah, so be it. Go ahead. We can live with it. Now, I grabbed this piece from, is it from Friday? What was the date? Way back when? I don't know. This is September 22nd. Today's the 26th, 25. Yeah, so Friday. Just doing a little math in my head. Not math. Counting squares on a calendar. Menendez accused of brazen bribery plot, taking cash and gold. And that's the thing I think that kind of cooked his goose on this one in terms of the court of public opinion. The governor of New Jersey called on Senator Robert Menendez to resign. Again, strategically so, but it's also kind of a power play for the governor here as he gets to fill that Senate seat. I'd call for him to resign too. The senator stepped down from his chairmanship of the Foreign Relations Committee. That I think is probably required of him as part of the rules of the Democratic Senate caucus. But let's see, this piece, Benjamin Weiser, Tracy Tully, and William K. Rashbaum are the byliners on the New York Times piece. Menendez, the Democratic chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, was charged on Friday during the show, by the way, and I did see that, and I just didn't get around to discussing it at that point, because there was plenty more to go on with, but charged on Friday with taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes, including bars of gold bullion, and that never really looks good, to wield his power abroad and at home. And as I was saying right before the break, it was always the case that we would find out in the office that some friend or advisor or campaign person of his or campaign donor of his was interested in something in particular, but it did seem like, well, that's sort of the way of things, right? People who are close to the congressman, for whatever reason, nefarious or otherwise, bring up issues that they want to see taken care of, and the congressman will say, to hell with that, I'm not doing it, and others, the congressman will say, yes, this is good politics, we should be doing this. And sometimes, it's not great politics, but it will make a very big donor happy. We were aware that that was a thing that could happen, but we weren't, it wasn't a big topic of discussion, but occasionally you would find out from the chief of staff or something. This is a priority. He wants to make this a priority for political reasons, which we don't necessarily discuss here, but suffice to say the congressman is very interested in seeing it work. Seeing work being done on it in an official capacity, and for your own motivational reasons to move this to the top of your agenda, it's of personal interest to him, and it's of personal interest to people who are very important to him for various reasons. Most of that will be beyond your purview, but you should know, perhaps you should know who those people are, because in some cases they come up, they will come up in your research on the subject. And you should know, okay, well, this person who's a central player is someone who's important to Bob, and that's all you need to know. But I don't have much else to compare that to. I didn't work in anybody else's office, but that didn't strike me as unusual. I think that happens in a lot of offices. And in a lot of offices, if you look at it just right, you would say that too is corruption. But, if you don't find money in a bank account somewhere to back that up, it's just, well, this person's important to me, and I did it for them because they're important to me, because they donate to my campaign, but there's no cash sitting in my house or gold bars sitting in my house to attest to the fact that it's something even more nefarious than, well, they support me in the campaign, which is, still considered fair game in America. But anyway, So here we go. Gold bars. How do you like that? The 3-count federal indictment depicted a brazen plan hatched during furtive dinners. I don't know what makes a dinner furtive. In text messages and on encrypted calls, much of it aimed at increasing U.S. assistance to Egypt and aiding businessmen in New Jersey, which is, of course, part of the job description, aiding businessmen in New Jersey. I mean, it's become part of it. And you might do differently if you were in the Senate on behalf of New Jersey. But I don't know how long you'd stay in the Senate on behalf of New Jersey. Mr. Menendez's wife, that adds a new angle to things. Nadine Menendez, recently married. I don't know Nadine. Is accused of acting as a go-between, passing messages to an American-Egyptian businessman. While Hannah, who maintained close connections with Egyptian military and intelligence officials, the indictment said. I wonder if he had any relationship with the guy who owns Steve Bannon's house, Capitol Hill townhouse, during all those years. Don't know. Egypt's a big country. Probably not. Just wondering. At any rate, in one text to an Egyptian general, Mr. Hanna referred to the senator who held sway over military sales, financing, and other aid as our man. That's not great. But everybody thinks senators that they know are their men or women, as it happens. So keep that in mind. There are 10 other people who also thought that Menendez was their man, and there are 100 people out there who think every senator is their man or woman, and they're largely right. But, okay. Mr. Menendez, in a strongly worded rebuke to prosecutors, said that he was confident the matter would be, quote, successfully resolved once all the facts are presented. I don't know. Do we really want to go through all of this? Well, you know what? I'll go through this part because I did see this. This hints at the true tragedy of it all. Speaking of my own secret origin, Bob Menendez's secret origin is actually pretty inspiring. And, you know, I don't know whether it was always a plot to go wrong or whether just things went south later on. You get power and you just do weird things with it over the years until it gets worse and worse and worse. And finally you're caught with gold bars in your house. Friday's charges described an intermingling of the bare-knuckle backroom dealings of Mr. Menendez's home state of New Jersey and delicate matters of security in the Middle East. They represent the latest episodes in a decades-long political career that took Mr. Menendez, the son of Cuban immigrants, from the Union City, New Jersey's school board to the halls of the Senate, a career marked by accusations of corruption and an earlier federal indictment that ended in a hung jury. The new charges threaten Mr. Menendez's vast political power as well as his freedom. Governor Philip D. Murphy of New Jersey, a close Democratic ally, called on Mr. Menendez to resign, an admonition that unleashed a torrent of similar messages from political leaders throughout the state. By the way, they're also all lining up to get that seat. You know, there's some self-interest in all of that, but it's not the worst thing in the world if self-interest drives you to do the right thing. But you should take note of it. Mr. Menendez insisted he would not heed them. I'm not going anywhere, he said in a statement Friday evening. Mr. Menendez did send a letter to Chuck Schumer of New York, the Senate Majority Leader, informing him that he was stepping down as chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, as required by the rules of the Senate Democrats adopted to govern themselves. The corruption scheme, according to the indictment, extended beyond foreign aid. Mr. Menendez is accused of using his position to influence criminal investigations of 2 other New Jersey businessmen, one of whom was a longtime fundraiser for Mr. Menendez. And toward that end, the senator recommended that President Biden nominate a lawyer, Philip R. Sellinger, to be U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, because Mr. Menendez believed he could influence Mr. Sellinger's prosecution of the fundraiser, the indictment said. Mr. Sellinger, who was ultimately confirmed for the post, did not bend, prosecutors said. Now, at this point, I don't know whether they edited things or I just read it elsewhere, but as I mentioned, his backstory, Menendez's backstory, was of some interest, and I thought it was in this piece, and maybe they added more information and edited that out. But as they point out, his career went from the Union City School Board to the halls of the Senate, and I can tell you just my memory of this stuff was that who knows, it was him telling the story, so I guess you take it with a grain of salt, but, he was on the school board in Union City, New Jersey, but my recollection of the story is that, he was the youngest ever elected member of the school board. He was elected to the school board of Union City when he was 20 and still a college student locally. I think he went to St. Peter's, I think is that right? Is that the name? In Jersey City. And, but had, grown up and gone through Union City public schools, and I guess found that the school board either famously inept or possibly even corrupt. And, so as a young guy and a product of the public schools said, I can run and I can fix it while he was still in college. So, that was pretty remarkable and inspiring by itself. And then he goes on to work in the mayor's office, but then to no one's surprise, as it turns out, the Union City mayor himself at that point was also corrupt and inept. But this one I know was put on trial for corruption, and Menendez testified against him. And by the way, this corruption trial, not just I guess it is your standard garden variety, garden state corruption trial, in that it involved allegations that the mob was involved, and that meant testifying against the corruption of the mayor meant testifying against the corrupting influence of the mob. And it was noted in the article that I read, whether it was this one or another one, that he had to wear a bulletproof vest. And I remember him telling the story of this, wearing a bulletproof vest to court to testify against mob figures in this corruption trial. So it was kind of inspiring. And, his whole backstory was the place was traditionally corrupt, and I ran as an anti-corruption candidate. And so 2 things you could take from that, and you could take equal parts from both. I think it's consistent. On the one hand, you could say, the worst story, the oldest story in the world about politics, right? You run as an anti-corruption candidate, and through circumstances and over the years, you find yourself mixed up in exactly the same corruption. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But another view of it, and certainly something he'll advance at trial, I would guess, is you could say, well, one of the things that the mob might actually do to you, or wish they could do to you anyway, when you testify against them for corruption, is to say, we're going to take you down. And while it might be a little over the top these days for the mob to assassinate a senator, or maybe they thought we could assassinate him while he's on the school board or mayor of Union City, but we can't get to him once he's in Congress or whatever, maybe the state assembly, because he climbed the ladder pretty straightforwardly, right? School board, mayor, state assembly, state senate, House of Representatives, then into the Senate, considered running for governor at some point. Anyway, at some point, I guess you get beyond the reach where the mob says, yeah, we could survive. It's beneficial to us to do this hit, right? Killing a member of U.S. Congress, probably not. Maybe even the state assembly might be beyond their ken these days. Who knows? Anyway, they might say, well, we're going to get you at some point. It would be imaginable for them to say, why don't we try and rig it up so that it looks like he's hopelessly corrupt, and that would be as embarrassing as anything. To take him down on corruption charges would be the greatest, ironically, justice in their view. So could that happen? It could. It's a great novel plot. Is it real? Did it happen here? I don't know. I have no reason to think so. It's worth entertaining, but, gosh, this is happening a lot. Maybe that argues for it, right? How could you be accused of it twice from 2 or 3 different donors without there being a grain of truth to it? And I guess, if you believe it, the explanation could be they're trying desperately. The mob never gives up on this stuff. What do they care if your last trial ended in a hung jury? Do it again. But you might think, well, if that were the case, wouldn't you be doing more to protect yourself from those charges and doing more to distance yourself from even the possibility of being charged? Yeah, probably. So, where were we here? The corruption scheme, according to the indictment, extended beyond foreign aid. He was trying to get certain allies named U.S. Attorney for New Jersey because, it says here, he could influence that U.S. Attorney in the prosecution of one of the fundraisers, a longtime friend of Menendez, who was apparently in trouble in this and another scheme. Menendez is also accused of meddling in an investigation by the New Jersey Attorney General's office, using advice and pressure in an attempt to persuade a senior prosecutor to go easy in the case of two associates of a man who gave Ms. Menendez, I think they mean here Mrs. Menendez, but they use the all-around Ms. Menendez, a Mercedes-Benz convertible. The prosecutor considered Mr. Menendez's actions inappropriate and did not agree to intervene, according to the indictment. That's how you stay out of trouble. In exchange for all these actions, the indictment said the senator and his wife accepted cash, gold, payments toward a home mortgage, the luxury car, and other valuable things. The day after a trip to Egypt in 2021, the indictment said Menendez asked in an internet query, "How much is 1 kilo of gold worth?" Well, he was just trying to invest. I mean, every time you sign on to the internet, they try to tell you to invest in gold. He was just asking questions. All right. Damian Williams. I mean, actually, that query is probably on a lot of computers, mostly because you are bombarded with buy gold. And they will tell you what the offering price is. And then, if you're smart, if you're smart, you say, no, I'm not interested in that, buying gold over the internet. If you're smart-ish and think you might be being taken in, you might say, well, how much is a kilo of gold worth? Hey, it's less than they're asking me to pay. I will not invest. But if you also have gold bars in your house, well, that's going to look different. So, Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, said at a news conference announcing the charges that Menendez's actions were meant to serve a favored few. The prosecutor said that Menendez's Senate website explicitly detailed the kinds of services he would not provide because they would be improper, among them influencing private business matters and intervening in judicial issues and criminal trials. Constituent service is a part of any legislator's job. Senator Menendez is no different, Williams said, but he added, behind the scenes, Menendez was doing these things for certain people, the people who were bribing him and his wife. Allegedly. Soon after the news conference, Menendez issued an angry page-long denunciation of the charges. Whatever. You could take it for what it's worth. Other details, the charges against Menendez, now 69 years of age, a nice age. And the others follow a lengthy investigation by the FBI and federal prosecutors in Manhattan, and they come nearly 6 years after his trial on unrelated corruption claims ended with a hung jury. And golly, if they aren't happening every 6 years, and that isn't the length of a senator's term, it does make you wonder. James Smith, who heads the New York FBI office, which we're not fans of, typically, right, said Friday that the conduct detailed in the indictment damages the public's faith in our system of government and brings undue scorn to the honest and dedicated public servants who carry out their duties on a daily basis. There's lots of reasons to doubt the veracity of the whole thing, but that only, I think, in the end makes the safe play, saying, you know what, why don't we try to get him out of the way and install somebody else who will, I'm sure, later be accused of the same sort of corruption. All right. Well, more details about the relationship between Menendez and Mr. Hanna, who is described here as a longtime friend of Ms. Menendez, who founded a halal meat certification business, also named in the indictment Fred, I don't know how you say his last name, Daibes, D-A-I-B-E-S, Daibes, I don't know. A New Jersey real estate developer and fundraiser for Menendez, and Jose Uribe, who works in trucking and insurance. It's a 39-page indictment, charges Menendez and his wife with conspiracy to commit extortion under the color of official right, meaning that they used his official position to force someone to give them something of value. Yuck. At one point, according to the indictment, Ms. Menendez bragged that her actions would make Mr. Hanna more powerful than the president of Egypt. And I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I'm sure he thought it sounded nice. Ms. Menendez in 2018 and Mr. Hanna arranged meetings and dinners with Egyptian officials and Mr. Menendez, whom she had just begun dating. There's a slight age difference here, but they're at an age where it's not quite that important, I would guess. She's 56. He's 69. So she's younger, but, not in their 20s. Anyway, there, the Egyptian officials made requests related to foreign military sales and financing, among other things, in return for Mr. Menendez's promise that he would facilitate such sales. The indictment said Mr. Hanna promised to put Ms. Menendez on his payroll in a job where she would perform little or no work. After one meeting with Egyptian officials, Mr. Menendez obtained from the State Department non-public information about the number and nationality of people serving at the U.S. Embassy in Egypt. The indictment said it notes that such information is highly sensitive and its disclosure could threaten security. That's not nice. Menendez texted that information to Ms. Menendez, who forwarded it to Mr. Hanna. He then sent it to an Egyptian official, the indictment said. At a dinner around the same time, Mr. Menendez disclosed to Mr. Hanna other non-public information about the United States military aid. Shortly, according to the indictment anyway, shortly thereafter, Mr. Hanna texted another Egyptian official, the ban on small arms and ammunition to Egypt has been lifted. That means the sales can begin. That will include sniper rifles, among other articles. Yay. The indictment also showed the cozy relationship Ms. Menendez and Mr. Hanna fostered between her husband and Egyptian officials. Once, the indictment said, Menendez met in his Senate office with Ms. Menendez, Mr. Hanna, and an Egyptian intelligence official to discuss human rights matters that had been affecting aid to the country, which would not be out of keeping with his job, but for the circumstances preceding it, I guess. Later in that evening, the group headed to a steakhouse in Washington for dinner. That was a habit of his, but so it is with almost everybody in Washington. Mr. Hanna started operating his company, the halal meat company, ISEG Halal, in 2019. And within a year, the Egyptian government had made it the sole entity authorized to certify that halal meat imported to Egypt from anywhere in the world had been prepared according to Islamic law. So, very lucrative contact. Is there more worth going through? There's lots of charges. I don't know whether it's something we want to repeat at this stage, just because you've probably already read all about it. We'll follow things as they develop. I don't even know if we would make it all the way through the article at this point before our break. And of course, in our fourth segment, is that how many segments we have? Yes, our fourth segment. It's Tuesday. We may get a chance to check in with Joan McCarter. She got my message last week that I corrected the record and said, I remember as we were leaving last Tuesday, I said, I might be off the air Tuesday. And I had miscalculated and not checked the calendar, which day was Yom Kippur. Of course, that was yesterday. So we're back. So she acknowledged that. So I think everything's on track. Anyway, let's see. Other things anything we might be able to sneak in before we get to that segment? No, I don't think so. And we'll push back one more day, I guess, on our report from the latest in Ottawa County, Michigan, to make sure that we have time to play the entirety of Rosalind McGregor's latest segment. Let's see. Anything else that we might be able to sneak in before we break for the third time? Yeah, sure. I had mentioned, yes, this was the other connective thread. The mention earlier of James O'Keefe when we were talking about Alex Jones in 2000 sneaking a hidden camera into Bohemian Grove and saying, that's maybe where his operation got its inspiration. Well, it doesn't matter, because his operation has suspended all operations indefinitely. We had heard that they were in serious trouble there. This from the Daily Beast from last Thursday. Project Veritas suspends all operations indefinitely, according to certain reports. The right-wing media group, Project Veritas, known primarily for its undercover video stings, suspended all operations on Wednesday after months of unsuccessful cost-cutting measures, according to Mediaite. But we're reading their report about what Mediaite had to say in Daily Beast instead, because that's how it landed here. In a letter to the organization's few remaining staffers, Human Resources Director Jennifer Kiak said that it was necessary to put operations on pause in the interest of preserving the possible future existence of Project Veritas. they have a comeback planned, I guess. She also announced another round of layoffs in the note, calling the move a reduction in force, Mediaite reported, because that's what layoffs are called. Sources told the outlet that half a dozen staffers were laid off this week alone, including all its remaining journalists. So what's left? People to clean up, I guess. Just 11 people remain on the payroll, one former staffer told Mediaite. The development was first reported earlier on Wednesday by Bobby Haar, a former investigative reporter for Project Veritas. He tweeted that Keok, if I have that pronunciation correct, and CEO Hannah Giles had cited financial ruin as reason for the additional layoffs. So that's unusually forward. Usually they don't tell you exactly why they're laying you off, or especially if the answer is financial ruin. Anyway, well, that's good news. We're not going to get through the rest of the article. Oh, I should have used the time to announce the breaking news texted to me earlier by my mom, thanks Mom, that the Supreme Court has rejected Alabama's attempt to avoid creating a second black majority congressional district. This breaking news from just this morning, according to CNN. And that sounds like good news, except the fact that they've rejected it before hasn't changed Alabama's mind. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter here with us because it's Tuesday and it's a thing that we do. Good morning, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm fine.
Good. We've got lots of news to cover, and we've been waiting. I don't know if you want to tell people that there might be a government shutdown.
There might be a government shutdown.
Oh, I can't believe it. Why didn't you say anything earlier?
People have been talking about it since, what, January?
Yes, that's right. Like the fact that, yes, Trump didn't wear a mask because it would smear his makeup. Yeah, there's going to be a government shutdown. I don't know. That's in the news as though that were a revelation of some kind. But also the government shutdown. But you've been you're saying you were working on a piece for it this morning because it's news.
It's news.
Now, what's new news about it?
Well, Schumer and McConnell, the Senate, have apparently decided that they have to save the day after all.
What? All right.
Yeah. So they are starting work. Well, they worked all weekend, nice. Actually.
Oh.
And will bring a cloture motion to the floor this afternoon on the one thing that the House managed to finish this summer before August recess, an FAA reauthorization bill.
Okay. That's how far back you have to go for the House to have finished any work.
Yes,
this summer.
July.
Before the recess.
They did get that finished, luckily. Dodged a procedural bullet there because the Senate obviously needed some kind of vehicle so that they could send back. The House has to originate funding bills.
Right. Good reminder. Okay, so there's something has happened, and they're going to use this.
Yeah, it's likely to be pretty short, 4 to 6 weeks, just giving them some breathing room to try to figure out stuff. They're probably not going to include aid to Ukraine because Rand Paul says he'll block them trying to do that.
Okay.
They might not include disaster relief this time around because Rick Scott insists that he wants his standalone bill to be the way that they do that.
Oh, well, that's an interesting twist. He's not saying there shouldn't be disaster aid because that would be ridiculous for a senator from Florida, but he would still do it.
Yes, he wants to make sure he gets all the credit for it.
I see. Okay. I mean,
So those two things might not be in it. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that expires at the end of the month beyond government funding. Authorizations for the FAA, which is good that they're using this bill.
okay.
A temporary pay increase that started in 2021 for wildland firefighters. That's supposed to end, and when that ends, they could just see a decimation of the firefighting ranks because they don't make enough money without this pay bump to keep doing this job that's very, very dangerous. So we could lose, a huge chunk of our firefighting force. Temporary assistance for needy families, welfare. Authorization for that ends. Medicaid payments, boosted Medicaid payments to community health centers and community hospitals. So a lot of stuff that just all happens to not last past September 30th if Congress doesn't do something. So they'll probably try to put extenders for all of these things in this bill as well, along with just, okay, we're going to keep funding the government at this level for the next 6 weeks while you in the House figure out what in the hell you're doing.
Okay. I mean, so now they at least have a platform to try and ride to the rescue. The House still has to agree to it. Who knows?
Right.
But
And, there's not a whole lot of time.
no.
There's very little time.
It's September 26th right now.
It's September
There's
26th.
30 days in this month, and that's the way
And
it is.
it takes a long time for the Senate to get through everything, even when they have unanimous consent. So they probably won't be able to actually pass it all before Thursday afternoon, evening. Send it over to the House on Friday.
29th.
That just gives McCarthy 2 days to decide what he's going to do.
Yeah. So,
And of course, if he does decide to put this on the floor, it won't have the cuts that the hardliners have been demanding and that he's apparently acceded to. The latest over the weekend was as much as a 27% cut to everything except defense and veterans programs.
So we've had 1% across the board floated, 8% across the board floated, and now pick and choose, but 27%.
Yeah.
Whatever number. I don't know.
Just for the short term. But, once you have those cuts made, it's very hard to go back.
Yeah.
So if he does do this clean bill with Democrats, then Matt Gaetz and whoever else might certainly pull up the motion to vacate.
Sure.
So, McCarthy has a choice.
Yeah.
Keep government functioning, protect the big majority of his conference by not shutting down government, or cave to Matt Gaetz again.
Yeah.
I'm not holding my breath on
which
what
one
he
he
does.
Yeah, I mean, and other times, like, okay, John Boehner, well, it's an issue for him too. He could be kicked out, but it was easy to predict. All right, he might allow a short shutdown, but just to raise pressure on his radical right colleagues to the extent he can, and then ride to the rescue because he knows at heart you can't keep the government shut down. McCarthy probably knows that from watching Boehner deal with it and watching Paul Ryan deal with it and every Republican who's ever been in charge. But so what? Because he's going to get kicked out, and is he ready to possibly be thrown out on his ear? Or does he think there's power in the argument of, yeah, sure, you can, but who's going to take the job and who can you muster votes for to get in there without it becoming an embarrassment? Yeah.
And, if he actually did this in good faith and kept government running with Democratic votes, Democrats would probably bail him out on a motion to vacate. So he shouldn't be afraid of the motion to vacate. He shouldn't be.
Yeah. And, right. I could see him fluctuating on that, though.
Anyway, that's where we're at now.
Do I want to be saved by Democrats? Would they really save me? I think so. But how? I mean, it's a good question. Because, honestly, if they didn't save him, it would be like, well, now chaos in the House. But It's a very Republican chaos.
Right.
So I can see where
there isn't a lot of incentive for Democrats to try to save him.
No, maybe once.
I know that a lot of them are thinking it could be worse. It could be worse. We have to, keep the devil we know. Could it be worse? Really?
He's not a particularly good devil to know.
No.
I mean, you could certainly imagine crazier people on an individual basis. There's worse people. But given that he can only govern as badly as the worst member of his conference, I'm not sure it makes much difference. He's as empty as any empty suit could possibly be. We could get a known quantity crazy person who acts of their own volition, but what's the difference? Because that's the person who would have been dictating McCarthy's moves all along. So right. I don't know. Okay. It's a maybe, and it might be one of those things that the Democrats are willing to bail him out of once, but maybe not twice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, life's tough.
It would be really nice if they didn't shut government down.
Yeah, that would be better.
And they decided not to shut government down by the end of the day Friday. So that some of us could have a weekend.
That would be, well, for you. You don't even work for the government. What's it? Yeah, but you have to cover it. It's even worse. But at least your operation isn't shutting down. You'll get paid. That's nice.
I'll get paid.
Okay. Well, that seems fair. We are all supposed to want that. So, all right. The government, though, may shut down. And we've known it for a million years. And we know who's responsible. And they know that they will be held responsible. But enough of them don't care or think it's actually a good thing that they might actually try it. And
well, and it's the same story. It's always been. Their Freedom Caucus members are extremists. They're in these deep red districts where they're completely safe. And they don't give a damn about any of their colleagues.
No. And there may be safety in them in saying eventually, whether it's before the shutdown or shortly after the shutdown, so they keep the thing short and manageable, to say, well, our new enemy is rhinos in the Senate. That's our big problem. And what do you know? Some of us might run against those rhinos in the Senate, like real soon, and this would be good for that campaign. That could be their backdoor out. They get enough Republican Freedom Caucus people saying, this is what will launch my campaign for Senate, and my dissatisfaction with having been jammed by them. But in the meantime, the government runs. People forget that I did this, and in a year, I launched my campaign for replacing the rhinos that did this to us. It's a play.
It's a play, and it could work.
Yeah. Try it, guys. Why not? Okay.
Chaos.
The usual. All right. So that's what's immediately been occupying your time.
Yes.
What other things?
I am going to segue quickly, probably
Certainly.
in my writing to the Supreme Court.
Okay. Good.
Where,
we'll just snuck that in.
As you said before the break in breaking news, they did the right thing on Alabama.
Yes. That's
which
nice.
I am not surprised about necessarily, because they've decided to be a lot more careful about what they do in the shadow docket.
Okay.
This was an emergency application from Alabama Republicans to try to force their defiance of the original Supreme Court order in creating the new district maps and creating a second black district in the state of Alabama. The Supreme Court told them to. They said no.
Amazing.
And then they decided, because did we talk about this, the Kavanaugh story?
A little bit.
We did, yeah. They had intelligence, quote unquote, that Brett Kavanaugh was ready to flip.
Oh.
And so they decided that they would push it, apparently.
Okay.
I mean, this is the story that Alabama press were talking about.
Interesting.
I
guess they would do this anyway.
I mean, that would be a really obvious and dumb thing for Brett Kavanaugh to do this quickly.
Yeah.
So
he did.
I'm not entirely surprised that in the shadow docket the Supreme Court decided, no, we're not going to do this. When it comes before the Supreme Court and is fully argued, do I expect Brett Kavanaugh to flip? Yes.
Oh, well, maybe, yeah. So the intelligence that he was ready to flip might not mean... just not under these circumstances. It wasn't as easy as that.
Not within months of having made that decision.
But if you convince me over the course of the next year...
Exactly.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be it's a strategic way for Kavanaugh to handle it, if indeed that's it. And the fact that they made this emergency application isn't surprising. What else are you going to do? You're being ordered to do this thing you don't want to do. And if you do have intelligence that says Kavanaugh might flip, well, why not give him the chance to flip right now on the shadow docket?
Right.
Oh, well, he probably won't do that. Well, file it and see. What do I care?
It does take some chutzpah to say F you to the Supreme Court and then come back within weeks to the Supreme Court and say, yeah.
Remember that thing where we said F you? Do you also say F you to yourself? No? Oh. Well, I had intelligence that you did. Sorry. Will you say it next year? Maybe. All right.
Maybe. Yeah.
We'll be back. So, okay, so they don't win this emergency bid, and now, but aren't we, does that leave us back at, well, what if they just continue to say, I'm not drawing it.
Yeah, what if?
You draw it.
What happens? They just play out the clock and have no choice but to use the old maps for the next election in Alabama.
Have
the
no
bad
choice.
Maps.
Yeah.
And they just play this out.
That's
until they get what they want.
That seems like part of the bid here. Like, well, we'll give the court the chance to let Kavanaugh flip, but if he doesn't flip and we just continue not to draw the districts, won't they eventually say, we're too close to an election?
Yeah.
You got it. So the same game as always.
It's not like you can throw them all in jail. Or,
Isn't it, though? It's not. You're right. But it should be, because
yes.
Honestly, all you get then is just people saying, well, we know that the fallback position is the courts will say we got to have an election. And there's got to be lines, and these are lines. They're bad lines, and you're bad people for drawing them this way. I expect you to redraw them again after the next election. But what year is it? It's 2023. The census was in 2020. This is all supposed to have been done already. They've had the 2022 elections with bad lines. They're going to have the 24 elections with bad lines. Pretty soon it'll be, we'll fight about the 26 elections, and they'll say, well, the 2030 census is coming. Maybe we could wait. I don't know. But they find ways. You just find something to appeal and let it linger for 2 years, because that's how long it takes to get back to the Supreme Court. And maybe the fact that they didn't take it up on emergency appeal is a way of kicking the ball forward so that the appeals last longer too.
Yeah.
And but they and other states are very adept at playing this game. Everything when it comes to congressional district lines, every lawsuit takes 2 years, miraculously the same amount of time that the House sits, just as miraculously, as much as we may think that this is justified, they only managed to indict Bob Menendez every 6 years, which is weird also.
Speaking of which, there's upcoming news on that from Daily Kos. So
okay.
Keep an eye out. Stay tuned to Daily Kos for New Jersey information.
Wink, wink. I'm getting indicted.
And maybe a primary endorsement.
Okay. Oh, all right. Fun and exciting things to watch.
He's in some trouble now politically. I mean, we've had now 4. Fetterman was the first, and then Sherrod Brown, and then Tammy Baldwin, and now John Tester saying, "Yeah, enough's enough, Bob. You gotta resign."
There's good strategic reason for it.
And it helped, too, last night that Nancy Pelosi said the same thing.
Pelosi
saying it has enough weight that I think other people can step up and say, yeah, you're pretty much right. So.
Yeah. New Jersey House members will be a little bit frozen for various reasons. It may look weird for them to look like they're clearing the path for their own appointment. Bob Menendez Jr. sits with them.
Andy Kim, Mickey Sherrill, some of them actually have, and pretty immediately said, okay, enough,
okay,
Bob,
well,
enough. So,
they're more open about it. And they may find themselves named to that seat, but okay, that's not the worst thing in the world. Hey, I don't want this to happen to our state. Oh, you want me to? All right. Some of them will be surprised by it. Some of them will not. Some have been angling for it for years. Okay. But okay, that's good news. So we know where people stand on those things. And
yes. And again, keep watch on the front page of Daily Coast today for more on that. I believe it's today.
Yes. All right. Well, I believe it's today too. You can't convince me
Tuesday
it's not.
Real?
It doesn't feel like
Tuesday
it.
Tuesday a thing.
But okay, well, watch out for that. Well, good. There'll be more news to come that way. All I could do was say, well, here's what happened Friday, and I didn't get a chance to discuss. Although the only thing that came out after the show ended was, what? Gold bars? Oh,
yeah.
That can't be good. So were they in the freezer?
The cash he has been taking out of his personal savings for, what did he say, 30 years?
What? Oh, okay.
Because of his family's experience in Cuba. He was not born in Cuba. And uncertainty, and this is his emergency cash.
Wow. Well,
which he converted to gold bars.
Yeah, I mean that's hard to escape.
Well, in an emergency.
Yeah, that's the way you want to be able to keep your wealth portable in the event of a midnight escape from a tyrannical regime. Gold bars.
Yes.
Yeah.
I liked Fetterman's response to that.
Oh, I don't think
in our house we have an emergency flashlight
made of gold. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, that's an unusual thing, to be sure. It doesn't really mesh great with, escape from Cuba typically itself, also by boat. Gold
right.
bars won't be the way to do it.
Be most conducive to floating.
But yeah, okay. Well, you're not sure what currency to invest in. Could have been Bitcoin, I guess, but, easier to move. But all right, gold bars. No. That's not great. So.
The other part that made that explanation a little bit weak was the fact that all of the pictures showed the cash with those security threads that go through.
Yeah.
That we've only had for the last, 10 years?
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true. So, well, they were deferred payments to myself over 30 years. I mean, people keep cash at home, but... all right. Well, that is unusual, to say the least. What can I tell you? We'll see how this one plays out.
We'll see. That took up most of the news yesterday, to be honest.
Okay.
I think because people are tired of shutting down, maybe.
Yeah. Or we understand
the chaos
that's
in
coming.
the house has gotten a little old. They're going to have to really do something more extreme for people to care again.
When we get to this point, they just say, well, there's only a couple of days left. Either the news is they got an agreement or they don't. And
we should talk a little bit about what McCarthy is supposedly trying. He took Matt Gaetz's big idea,
his forehead,
to just go ahead and let the government shut down while they are pushing appropriations bills. So today they are going to vote on the rule for 4 appropriations bills.
Mm-hmm.
Which we'll see if the rule passes. McCarthy's track record on that in the last week hasn't been good.
But maybe now that he's saying, I'm doing Matt Gaetz's idea,
right?
Maybe it'll work.
His idea is that he builds enough goodwill with the crazies by using Matt Gaetz's idea that then they'll relent by the end of the week and give him his continuing resolution.
Okay.
With his 27% cuts to everything except defense and veterans programs.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I guess, it's not much of a plan. Like when you said it at first, Matt Gaetz's idea of pushing the appropriations bills through while the government is in shutdown. Well, that's what happens. The government shuts down and then the Congress tries to then pass all the appropriations bills so that it opens up again. That's usual play, but I see what you mean. Without trying a CR or any similar vehicle, until a shutdown happens. Don't try to save the day, or at least don't try to save it until the very last minute. But now we're
Well,
at it.
and in fact, Gates's plan is not to do a CR.
Not at all.
He says we just keep government shut down until we have all of the appropriations bills passed, and the Senate has passed them all, and Biden has signed them all.
But
we
might
just
be
keep government shut down until these appropriations go through, and then as the appropriations go through, those agencies get to open back up.
Mm-hmm.
Gates, no matter what, says no continuing resolution. I will not vote for a continuing resolution.
But there was some speculation they may override him.
He'll have at least 4 or 5 that go with him.
Okay.
So the only way
at least
McCarthy
initially
can do this is with Democrats.
Okay. Which will just make them mad and they'll say way more. Okay. Right. Well, this how many appropriations bills are unfinished? Are any of them? I mean, some of them are.
They got one through in July.
Oh.
They did the FAA authorization, and the Senate hasn't taken it up. Wasn't ag. Oh, also the Farm Bill expires this week. So that too.
Okay. So so it would take them quite a while.
That's food stamps.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's why it's so bad.
Yeah, they did get one through, and I can't remember what. But
that leaves a lot of work. And they
did 1 in 7 months.
To give you some idea of what it would take to do them one at a time, does Gates object to omnibus after shutdown?
Yes.
Or he does?
Yes. They all object to doing an omnibus.
Okay.
Because McCarthy agreed back in January that they were going to do each individual appropriations bill, and they were not going to do any more omnibus bills where they shoved a bunch of stuff into them.
Okay.
McCarthy said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. So Gates said, you're not going to do that anymore.
For what it's worth. I mean, every appropriations bill is actually a mini bus. It has several departments in it, plus a lot of other junk. So what's the difference? It's one of scale, not much more. But if they had to do 11 more, even if they did them as quickly as possible, it could take several weeks. So you'd have a partial government shutdown for up to 2 months, even if they finished.
Then they're doing really bizarre things. Demon Pass.
What? I can't believe they're giving themselves
the rule for Homeland Security, which is one of the bills that's coming up today. They put in a Demon Pass rule that if it passes in the House, the clerk has to hang on to it and not send it to the Senate until a separate bill that they've passed on border security goes to the Senate, is passed by the Senate, and is signed into law by Biden. Then they can have their Homeland Security appropriations.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And the sort of thing that Kent Conrad would have said was against the rules, or probably. But I'm not sure about that. I'll have to think that one through. But so rigging up the order in which things reach the Senate and then reach the president, so holding certain bills hostage. They can do the work on it and pass it, but it won't become effective because they're not sending the paperwork on until something else happens.
Well, and it's Homeland Security. It's
is that
money
important?
For border security.
They don't care about that, do they?
So they think somehow that, a month of not having any border security funding will force the Senate to act more quickly and pass this bill that they hate.
Oh. Well,
they're just trying to force their really, really racist immigration bill.
Oh, sure. Well,
on the Senate and on Biden.
And I imagine they figured they would do that by saying they'll cut off all the funding for border security and then spend that time saying, look what happened. Biden doesn't have any border security. We told you he was for open borders.
They think that they can turn this shutdown around by saying it's an immigration crisis.
Okay. It's a plan.
It's all they got.
Yeah. It's a strategery, and it'll work with their base, and that may be all they care about. But because it'll work with their base, the the traditional media will almost certainly say it's a legitimate position, and to be balanced, we have to say that something Biden ruined the border. I don't know. Wow. All right.
Wow.
I think that sets up the rest of the week nicely for us.
It does. And in other news,
we know what's happening. Yeah.
President Biden is making history today by going to a picket line in Detroit. I think it's Detroit.
Okay.
In Michigan, anyway.
Yes.
Also, Trump is going to one tomorrow, but it actually isn't at a union facility, and it was organized by the National Right to Work Foundation.
They're picketing, or they're putting together a thing that looks like a picket, so that way Trump can safely be seen at what looks like a strike. Is that without actually supporting it? I don't know.
Yes.
Interesting. Yes. Okay. Well, I wondered why when we first heard he was going to go to Michigan and meet with striking workers, I said that they might beat him up. I don't know what's going on. But all right. Well, we'll make sure that they're safe workers to hang out with, people who don't actually care about their jobs or the jobs of people working in the industry, but who will rally around with signs that make it look like he's gone to a picket line. Okay.
Yes.
Very
Whereas actually
crafty.
The people who oppose us
yes.
organized this whole thing.
All right. It's usual PR for him. All right. We'll see how this one develops. And if he gets, I don't know. I don't think it's going to make a great deal of difference in the news there. But we'll be back by next week. Will we be in shutdown? How many days we got left? Yeah. That's it. So you finally get to deliver on that shutdown. We'll let you call in and announce. Yep.
I was right.
Yeah.
You did it.
You were right all along for the past 12 years. Thanks, Joan. We'll check in with you then.
We'll talk to you next week.
All right.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
That's right. And of course, Justice Putnam comes up next with West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Check in for his takes on all of these stories from around the country and around the world. And don't forget, as Joan said, keep an eye on the front page of Daily Kos with some interesting, breaking, upcoming, maybe kind of sort of news about that New Jersey Senate seat. Let's see what they have up their sleeve.